So I request you to turn on the camera for the introduction, and then you can. Right. Okay. Fine. Namaskar and a very warm welcome to everyone joined in today on our 10th Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. This talk is being organized by the Central Zoo Authority in New Delhi as part of the ongoing Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. This Mahotsav is a 75-week-long celebration to commemorate 75 years of India's independence, which falls on the 15th of August 2022. The Central Zoo Authority is taking the celebration forward through a massive conservation awareness campaign entitled Conservation to Coexistence, the People Connect. Under the helm of this campaign, we will be showcasing 75 conservation priority species and 75 zoos for the entire duration, celebrating one species and one zoo each week. We are currently in week 10 of the celebration with the grey slender loris as the species in focus and the Shri Chamarajendra Zoological Garden or the Mysore Zoo as the zoo in focus. Joined in today to speak to us on the species in focus is Dr. Kaveri Kargupta. Dr. Gupta, brief introduction on Dr. Gupta. Dr. Gupta is an interdisciplinary ecologist with a doctorate in anthropology from the Arizona State University. She has studied the slender loris in Kalakar Mundatarai Tiger Reserve for over a decade and is the founding director of the Urban Slender Loris Project, which is a community-engaged citizen science initiative. Apart from studying the species, Dr. Gupta has been involved in multiple citizen science projects and is an active advocate for women in conservation. She has founded the Central Valley Cafe Scientifique in California, and it has been the recipient of various accolades throughout her career. And I would now request Dr. Gupta to please begin her talk on the species.
Thank you, Arundhati. Can you hear me well?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Sonali, for inviting me to give the talk. And thanks, Arundhati, now for doing the introduction. So I will just go into detail of my talk since it is there's very little time, looks like. I'll talk about slender loris and I'll tell you how I got into slender loris in the beginning, and then I'll tell you what we have been doing. Is it yeah, so here there's a picture of slender loris, and you all know that it's a or some of you may know it's a cryptic animal, cryptic primate. It's one of the smallest primate that found in India, and especially southern India and Sri Lanka. I first saw them in Kalakkad Mundantarai Tiger Reserve in probably about 25 years ago, when I was visiting Kalakkad Mundantarai. And luckily at that time, after we saw the animal, then Dr. Rauf Ali, who is now passed away, and Mr. Pramod Kant, the field director of KMTR, asked me to do the study of slender loris. So I said, okay, I will. And that's how it started. So here you see a male and a female with a baby. And these animals are really tiny. They are about 200 grams on an average and about 8 inches, 20 centimeter long and gray in color, as you see, with big dark eyes. With eyes has tapetum, which is like a layer in the retina which lets you see in dark, or lets the animal see in dark better. So I'll tell you what I did when I got invited to do the study. I worked as a biologist in the forests and in KMTR, and I did a survey at population level at the slender loris. And what we found is that lorises are, their abundance is related to the human modifications in their habitat. And the other thing that we noticed is that fragmentation. The fragmentation is in here during that time in KMTR was stump density per hectare, and so stump density varies between the plots where we have seen the lorises versus where we haven't seen them, and you can see in the map in the graph here. So why is fragmentation important for them? because of canopy continuity, because this is a canopy species. They need continuous canopy for their movement. So then I went in to do my PhD after spending a couple of years here. Uh, my central question was that what kind of social system do they have, and what type of mating system do they have? I spent first couple of months or first year of my field season. I spent trying to figure them how to capture these lorises, and at the end of my first season, we figured out that you have to climb the tree and capture them. They don't come on traps. We had put traps up on the canopy, and we only found rats and civet cats. So the next season, when I came back, had to radio collar them again. The way we captured them was climbing trees, as you can see here at night. I had a group of assistants, so a gang of five, and then we would go once we put the radio collars in them, we'd release them, and then we go and track them during the day and at night. So what we saw was we had about 33 animals radio collared at that time. Here I'm presenting the some of the males data, and if you look at here, you can see that there are three types of males that we found based on the home range size. There was one type of male that were roaming, which means they were roaming around a large area. Their home range was about 150 hectare, but they didn't have a small territory. They used to take about a month and a half to cover their home range. And then there was this settled male, and within the settled male types, there was a settled paired male and settled unpaired male. So what does this mean? Unpaired means they didn't have a female with them, and settled paired was like they had a female. The male had a female with that and with him during the study. So here you can see that the ranges were 6 hectares on an average. This is average I'm talking about. The males which are roaming. Sorry, 6 hectare is the male which is settled. The male which didn't have a female had a 8 hectare, and the male who are roaming had about 65 hectare. And you can see the association here. The males,
Ma'am,
the roaming rarely
ma'am,
had any. Yes.
ma'am, sorry to
Yes.
interrupt, but you need to tell me what to change when you want me to change the slide.
Oh, I can do
Yes.
myself. Is it not working?
Ma'am, it's not sharing. Your screen is not sharing. It's my
Oh,
screen that is
okay. I'm
sharing
sorry
right
then.
now.
Okay, so
Yes.
I'll
So
check.
yeah. So I'm
So
right
anyway,
now on the slide. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm going
Just
to
let
tell
me
you
know when
about.
you'd want me to.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Are you on the mating system slide?
Not yet. 1 minute. I'll just get there. Right.
Um,
Yes. I'm now on the further we know in mating system slide.
oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. So what
Yeah.
we know from studies before in other species that large testis volume relative to the body size means that it's an indicator of multiple male, or one male, multiple female mating system. And that this is especially when you don't have data on behavior or genetics of that population. Next slide, please. So what we are seeing here, we also measured the body condition of those males. And again, you can see here the roaming males and settled paired and unpaired males. They all have three different kinds of body conditions. Roaming males are the worst, and then the settled paired and unpaired males have the best body conditions. Next slide. Next slide. So, and again, we measured the testis volume, but it's interesting that roaming males actually had much smaller testis volume, and the settled paired male had the biggest testis volume. So, what does it mean? Next slide. Next slide. Was that means is basically, it means that they don't have one female, one male, multiple female mating system. So I'll tell you about little bit more detail later, but here we also looked at the ecological factors that affect the home range size and the mating system. We found that settled paired males and paired females, they live in the same habitat, so and those are the better habitats. Whereas roamers are in a marginalized habitat, so they are much in much more poorer habitats. However, all of those males actually use much higher canopy continuity, and they use certain plant species. There are about 10 or 15 species that they use the most. So, next slide, please. So I'm going to tell you, conclude here about this study. And if you have questions about this study, please let me know later and I can send you more information or talk to you guys more. So what we found is, we found three different types of males: paired, unpaired, and roaming male. And we found, sorry, next, you need to scroll through. So based on home range size, association, and physical conditions, there's the three different kinds of males. And adult paired males and females, their ranges overlap. But the male mating system, which initially thought they are very simple mating system, single male, multiple female, it's not that. It's much more complex than what we thought before. So we see evidence of some pair bonding and then some polygamy, some one male, multiple female sometimes, and then also we see mate guarding in the pair females, males. So next slide, please. So from here on, next slide, please. I then move on to telling you guys another story of another study that we did. This one actually, after I finished my PhD, I moved into doing more citizen science work, and from the forest of came here, I moved into studying urban ecology. One of the reasons that I did urban ecology was I was at that time in the US, and I realized that if we really want to save some of the habitats or do conservations, we have to do it with people. And where are most people living? They are in the urban areas, and urban habitats are where we can actually talk to people, engage people about with conservation much more easily. And I was also raising my kids at that time, so why not study urban habitats? So doing some work in California, I was back in India, this time in Bangalore, and wanting to do a slender loris study. How we found out about the slender lorises in Bangalore is, this was, I think, in mid 1990s. Some people realized in ISC campus there are lorises. And by the time I finished my PhD and came back to India, people started telling me about, you need to study slender lorises in ISC campus. So, long story short, I started a citizen science project for slender lorises in Bangalore to understand what's going on with them. So, next slide, please. I'll go through these two slides fast. The urban ecosystem, the importance of urban ecosystem is that cities are generally built by humans, for their shelter and protection. But that means it also actually increase the food availability and protection for other species other than humans, and it creates very predictable habitats for some species, especially those who are generalized species. Those generalized species like crows or some species of monkeys, they can actually survive much better in urban habitats. Next slide, please. So the challenges and opportunities are are quite a lot in urban habitats. One of the challenges, the cities have multiple stakeholders. They are much larger. Their habitats are very, very fragmented, and most of it is man-made. But the benefits are, you can do citizen science. You can actually involve people in understanding science, engaging them and empowering them, empowering communities through science. And also you can do participatory governance. We can actually work with policymakers and main stakeholders in the city. Next slide. um, you can see a very rapid urbanization that's happening in India, and Bangalore is probably one of the fastest growing mega cities in the world. Next. And you can see the development that's happening in Bangalore. It used to be called Garden City, but most of the Garden City part is now pretty much gone, and what you see is a more or less concrete jungles with some habitats that are still left. Next. Next slide. So here is the Bangalore, the way it's growing. You can see in this slide here that how when first Bangalore was um, uh, Bangalore started. And from then it's up to 2007. You can see the map here, but in the last 10 years or 15 years it has grown much more. It's still growing, and we don't know where it's going to stop. Next slide. So here is a picture of Slender loris from the. This was not taken in the city, but we have similar pictures taken in Bangalore city. So let me tell you. Next slide. How we did start the citizen science project. The citizen science project is called Urban Slender Loris Project. It's a participatory research project, participatory citizen science project. You can see here there are multiple organizations, both non-profits and institutions are involved with this project. So I spent about 6 months between 2014 and 2015 to start this project. Initially, I thought I'll be able to do it in 6 weeks. Ended up spending 6 months trying to figure out how we can start a community-based, community-engaged citizen science project on Slender loris. Next slide. So why did it take so long, and what are the objectives of this Urban Slender loris project? What we wanted to do is we wanted to determine the extent of change that happened in Bangalore city in terms of the distribution of Slender loris as well as the habitat types, identify the habitat variables that are affecting the Slender loris distribution, and engage citizens in conservation. So increase awareness through outreach programs. Next. And also then develop a long-term monitoring of Slender loris and their habitats in Greater Bangalore, as well as then develop a model so that we can actually do it in other cities. Let's go. Next slide. So how did I do it? I told you guys already that I spent 6 months. So initially we started with online survey, which was actually started in 2013, that part. Then we did selection of citizen scientists based on the online surveys, and then gave them training. Those citizen scientists, along with us, especially me and a few other scientists who teamed up with me, we started doing diurnal surveys about habitats, which are the habitats that are most likely potential habitats for lorises. And then based on those identified habitats, we decided to do nocturnal surveys. And how we chose the city, how we could figure out what are the places that we need to go and do the surveys. Even the diurnal surveys, we divided the city into 5 square kilometer grids, and each of these areas we looked at in the map. We looked at the green spaces, and then we went to looked at the checked them during the daytime, and then decided to do the nocturnal surveys. We also did tree identification training with other plant scientists, and then we developed outreach program, as well as we did a oral history survey about slender loris's past in the city, or what the perception of people about slender loris in Bangalore city. Next slide. Next slide. So what we did is we did lots and lots of meetings and lots of trainings. We actually took people to show them slender loris, sort of like loris walks in IISc campus, Indian Institute of Science campus. We then did meetings in outside the institution, so in cafes and restaurants, and wherever we could find places. We also teamed up with some of the cafe owners. For example, Koshis is one of our biggest hosts and biggest supporter. We also sometimes took kids to show them slender loris, as you can see in the third picture at the bottom. And of course, tree identifications done by Dr. Page here. Lot of lot of work, lot of manpower has gone in. Next slide, please. So based on the nocturnal survey that were done by community members, by the citizen scientists, the trained citizen scientists, we can see the distribution of lorises. These are, some of them are also, we talk to rescuers to figure out where they are rescuing. So you can see the past distribution, that is from talking to people, present distribution, the green patches, and then also the rescuers who rescue animals, rescue slender lorises from the city. So there's quite a bit of things happening here. Next slide. And here what I'm doing is I'm presenting you the very preliminary data. We are still on, the project is still ongoing, but we sort of gone into hiatus about the citizen science part of the project. So here you can see the areas where we had surveyed. Sighting per kilometer is an abundance index that we use for slender loris abundance, and they vary between habitats, between parks. So or campuses. IISc campus here has the highest amount of slender loris, as opposed to, if you look at Wood Science, which is the forest department headquarters, Aranya Bhavan is there. And also we saw in Kabban Park. So imagine in the middle of the city, we were able to see slender loris. So next slide, please. So what we noticed is that there are differences between institutions and forest or woodlands versus public parks. Um, Public park is where we're supposed to have quite a bit of sightings, because we heard from people before that they used to be found in public, or people have seen them in public parks. So what's going on there? We're not really very sure. It looks like that we need to actually look at much more, to quite a bit few other public parks to figure out what's going on. But one of the things that we can think of what's going on is also that the fragmentation due to development, and it's much higher. Earlier, for example, Lalbagh, the forest of Lalbagh used to be connected all the way down southern part of Bangalore city, where there are few other parks available, but it's not connected anymore. Next slide. Uh, um, one of the problem that we found during the study was during the citizen science study was that habitat destruction or habitat modification. In this case, this is a particular park which is called Nagavara Park. It's a forest department land. This is when we did the study. In the first picture on the left hand side top picture, we did the study. We found about 6 or 7 slender lorises there. We actually had found a female with an infant, so that means it's a breeding population. But this is in 2015. Few months later, we realized that this park is undergoing some changes. So we then went and talked to the forest department in Bangalore and realized that in the city, realized that they are developing a new park, and this park is basically park for use of for the people to use it. So they were doing these walking tracks, they were doing habitat modifications, they were putting roads inside. um, what is sad here is that this development is perhaps good for some people, but it doesn't really help to conserve the habitat for wildlife. It's not only just a loris habitat, but also it was habitat for snakes, butterflies, birds. We actually did diurnal counts of butterflies, snakes, and bird species, and we found quite high diversity in that area. But unfortunately, because of the pressure from the developers, forest department had to do these modifications, and now you don't really see anything anymore there, unfortunately. So we are not actually against development completely. What we are trying to say is that you can actually do coexist. And i I know that the series also says that coexistence with wildlife coexistence with humans. But how do you do coexistence in this kind of situation? I think what we should have done here is that instead of cutting down all the trees and modifying it and making it a manicured park, we could have just left the most of the canopy as it is, and we could have done these paths that were more look like natural habitat paths. In fact, I live now in North Carolina, where we have the city parks, which also have some of these lands that are for regenerations of natural vegetations, and you can actually have tiny little you know lanes, not lanes, I mean paths, that are connected between different forest types, and you can actually go for hikings and walkings, and also see birds and animals. And people love there. Most people use those paths instead of going up or walking in the roads, on the roads. So it's possible to do development. We don't have to cut down all the trees, or completely do a different kind of habitats for on the name of parks. Next slide, please. The other problems also we have is probably black magic. Although we are not very sure about the black magic, we actually took up a study on perception of slender loris. We did in that study, we interviewed 185 people from Bangalore city, and we didn't really find much about black magic. So that doesn't mean that it's not there, but it means that it needs to be studied a lot more. And it's one of the harder things to study, given that you have poachers and other things involved in it. Especially doing citizen science, it's not very easy. So the other thing also is that there are superstitions about slender loris throughout its range, whether it's Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or Kerala or Andhra. One of the thing is that people think of the lorises have evil eyes. And I can tell you, when I was doing my study in KMTR, people used to tell me that why am I studying slender lorises? They are so ugly. They're like evil looking animals. Why can't I do something else which are much better looking or less scary? So this is perception, and I think this kind of stuff we can actually do change people's attitude by engaging them in scientific studies, or listening to them what they have to say, and then talking and figuring out what would change their views and how can we change it. So you have to work with people. Next slide. So how did we do community engagement? And because a lot of times, whether it's India or outside in the US, or in Europe, I hear people asking me how was I able to do such community engaged, community based citizen science project. And believe me, we had so many volunteers. We had people coming and asking us that can we actually participate, can we go out with you guys. And we had to sometimes turn them down and say no, we don't have space this time. We have to, please put your name, we can call you or we can email you for the next survey or next Loris walk. We were fortunate enough to use the momentum that people in Bangalore city has about slender lorries. People think in the people think the lorries are cute. They are sort of like charismatic micro or mini fauna, as I call it sometimes, and because of that, I think there's a lot of interest in slender loris, and media picked up. So we had multiple newspapers doing stories, we had radio stories, radio interviews, we had blog posts, we had interviews, for magazines. So there's a lot of interest in people, and you can see here both Kannada medium newspapers and English newspapers had stories about lorises. We also had a story in Guardian newspaper that get published from UK. Next slide. Next part. We also had newsletters. Unfortunately, the newsletter is not being published right now since we are not doing the citizen science part. We had a huge amount of citizen engagement, and we still communicate with them. What we had done was we actually had a core group of people, which we have about 10 or 15 people. They were the one who I trained first, and then they are the one who decided where we are going to do the surveys and how we are going to do it, who is going to be engaged. So it's participatory in true sense. We also had an interest group that are sort of email listserv. We have social media presence, and we done online surveys about what do they think about slender loris, whether they were able to see slender loris before or they know anything about slender loris or not. And I think we have about 200 people participated in that survey until 2019, 215 people or so. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that we actually used multiple different medium to engage people. And apart from this, we also went and gave talks. I did it, and some of the core members have done it. We went to cafes, we went to restaurants, we went to um, places like Wipro's offices, so the corporate offices. We also went to schools and colleges, talking about slender loris. And that, this is a species that if you can see them here, instead of going all the way up in a forest where you have to go out and find them at night, and it's expensive, it's not possible lot of times, but here you can see them, it's in your backyard. And if you do conservation of your backyard, you not only have slender loris, but you can actually have lot of other species, that sometimes it can be some of the endangered species too. Next slide, please. As I told you that we have been doing loris walks. So these are the two slides I'm showing you. are actually people participating for Loris works. And we right now we are not, we had done a lot till 2018 2017. Right now we are not doing regularly because we don't have the capacity. We want to build the capacities. We have been planning to do some more work. Unfortunately, one of the things that people don't realize, that running citizen science project, even though they run by the volunteers, but it still takes lot of effort and people and time and manpower, which means manpower means we actually sometimes need to pay people. We need to have coordinators. We sometimes also need to give money to volunteers to come all the way from certain parts of the city to the main area where we are going to do surveys, because not all the people who have money can come. I mean, there are students, there are people who are working part time, who are coming, and they don't, lot of times they don't have a whole lot of money to come. So it's better if we have certain kind of some amount of funding available for giving them, and also hiring coordinators, paid coordinators to coordinate projects like huge project like this. So next slide. So if you look at the outreach that we have been doing, we have done Loris Works, we have done presentations, we have newsletters, we have social media presence, we had made posters. Mr. Koshi, Prem Koshi, had given us money for doing posters, and which we had put it up in many places. We also talked to children. Whenever we had time, many of us would go around and talking to people. We encourage people to come in, encourage kids to come in to the Nocturnal Loris Watch. We had radio shows, we have blog posts, and we also have newspaper articles, and continuously talking about Slender Loris and importance of citizen science uh, throughout wherever I get a chance, or our volunteers get a chance. So this is what I'm going to say, that this is a long-term effort. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of volunteers. And it's possible. It's possible to do it, and you can do other species too. Next slide. Next slide, please. So here I want to summarize what are the threats that we see in Bangalore city for Slender Loris, which are also actually threats for other species, not only just Slender Loris. We see the tree fellings, tree burnings for construction. We see urban sprawls. Urban sprawls are in terms of, increase increase the risk of injuries, and for animals to fall from trees. We always get information that, rescuers have to go and rescue them. There is a Slender Loris fallen from the tree, or the Slender Loris has come inside my house, or even in Palace Garden. Like once I got an email saying that, oh, there is a Slender Loris in the palace gate. What should we do? So these are happening because lorises don't have any space to go. And or there were trees before, they were roosting or having sleeping sites there, or had their home range there. Remember, these are territorial species, so they require certain amount of space, tree covers, and canopy continuity for movement. We also see, probably, we don't know, but we probably have some black magic, and maybe some pet trade. We don't have informations about that. We need to do future studies on those. And tree felling and burning and construction works actually changes the habitat. So we have lost green space, less green space. We have fragmented, isolated pockets, and we also have areas which do not have any trees, permanently, because if you have development, those trees are gone. Nobody is going to plant anything there. So all of those things actually causing the population decline, and perhaps if we don't pay attention for too long, those cute little animals that people are very proud of may go away, may go extinct locally from Bangalore city. So next slide please. We are, as I said, that we are still doing this study. We have a student, graduate student, who is going to do the work, for most likely for her PhD. And she actually has done some social behavior study in ISC campus, which we are. Well, I didn't have time to talk about it now, but we can talk about it later. What about what we found? But here it takes a global village to study slender loris. This is people that helped me during my PhD work. Next slide. And by the way, I actually did my PhD with a child in my toe. She was with me. She used to go out at me with me at night too sometimes. And then it takes a village to study a city. You need a lot of manpower, lot of engagement, not only just the community members, but also forest department, BBM, municipal corporations, city parks, um, you know donors. So it's a lot of work, and I hope we will be able to continue working on this for much longer, and then we can take this model to other cities, especially other mega cities that are also seeing this kind of um, habitat destruction. Hyderabad is probably one other example. So anyway, here I want to stop for now, and please, if you have questions, ask me later. And Mr. Rajit, please talk about your zoo here.
Right. Thank you, ma'am, for the very informative session on the slender loris and also in enlightening us on the challenges and opportunities that are there in citizen science initiatives. We now move on to the second part of our talk, which is on the Know Your Zoo. And we have Mr. Ajit Kulkarni, who is the Executive Director of the Mysore Zoo, to speak to us on the zoo. A brief introduction of Mr. Kulkarni. Mr. Kulkarni is a 2008 batch I Indian Forest Officer, and he has done his postgraduate in forestry and postgraduate diploma in advanced wildlife management from the Wildlife Institute of India. He has over a decade of experience in management and conservation of forests and wildlife, and he will speak to us today on the establishments of the Mysore Zoo. And I would now request Mr. Kulkarni to please begin his presentation.
Uh, Thank you, Ms. Arundhati. Dr. Gupta's presentation been a very detailed sort of presentation, and we could go through last decade of conservation of this slender loris as such in Bangalore as such. Thank you very much, ma'am. Just to brief about this Mysuru Zoo as such. Next slide, ma'am. So as we all know, it is in Mysore city. Next slide. And initially, this zoo as such was started by Maharaja of Mysore. Then Sri Chamarajendra way back in 1892. Initially, it was only for housing the animals which Maharajas got as a gift from other princely states, like cheetah from Udaipur or Jaipur kings and all. So like lion from this Junagadh kings. In that way, matlab, they used to visit other countries also. They used to receive animals as a gift, and they wanted to have some place to house them and take care of them. So that is how zoo as such started in Mysore. But later they took interest in it, and till now, even after post independence, there were some acquisitions of land for this zoo as such. So as on today, it is around 157 acres, and of which 80 acre is a zoo, and remaining 77 acre is of lake plus nature park. So it was given to forest department during 1972. uh, for the first time in the country, separate authority was started for zoo management as such in our country. And Karnataka started the authority called Zoo Authority of Karnataka, just to look after the affairs of zoos in the state. And followed by this, our CJD came in 1992. Next slide.
Sir, sorry to interrupt. Could you please bring the mic a little closer?
Yeah. So as I mentioned
Thank you.
about, yeah, apart from this, this Karanchi Lake and zoo as such, we also have a exclusive area, the conservation area we call Rescue and Rehabilitation Center and also Conservation Breeding Center. This was a forest land handed over to zoo management for rescue and rehabilitation of rescued animals and conservation breeding of some select species of endangered species. So to mention about this rescue and rehabilitation center, you must be knowing Mysore is very close to the Bandipur and Nagarwala Tiger Reserve. Even BRT is nearby. So of late, due to conservation efforts, there is an outflux of tigers and leopards. So whenever they end in a conflict with human beings, in order to save their relatives in a forest, it is better to take out those individuals. So had it been some other country, they would have finished them off. But our values doesn't permit. So we take such animals. It could be abandoned individuals or injured individuals or animals in conflict to this rescue and rehabilitation center, and we take care of them for rest of their life. As on today, we have tigers, leopards, elephants, many other lesser mammals and birds. Next slide. One of Mysore Zoo is one of the first zoo in the country. They started with the concept of master plan. So it is up to 32, 33 of coming years. Next, we are around 300 employees working for upkeep of this zoo. Next slide. Like any other zoo, we too have a mini sections to look after different works of zoo. It could be administration, it could be health, it could be a veterinary care, it could be a garden engineering, lake section, security and all. So there are around 11 sections we have, and each section has a supervisor, and again it is controlled by range officer and the deputy director. Next slide. So as per our master plan, we are supposed to have a 130 species, 131 species in our collection. But as on today, we have around 148 species. I'll tell this story later on. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. As on last month, we have around 1,493 individuals belonging to 148 species. Next slide. Yeah, this is the founder. Next slide. Yeah, another specialty of Mysuru Zoo been no, it has been interacting with for other foreign zoos even before independence. There were animal exchanges with even USA, Europe in those days, and because of that, Mysuru Zoo developed a specialization in housing and breeding of exotic animals. So once upon a time, we had more than 200 species of animals in Mysuru Zoo. But we are trying to reduce it now in order to adhere to the latest guidelines of seizure day. Next slide. Yeah, Mysuru Zoo is one of the first zoo in the country to start adoption program, because as you know, there are so many people around in society that they want to do something for animals. But some of the people even they want to have them as a pet, but our rule doesn't permit. But they want to do something. They want to involve in conservation to provide an opportunity. We have come up with a adoption program wherein people can contribute towards conservation by adopting animal for a year or so. So it is a very nominal amount. Actually doesn't cover the entire expenditure of animal as such, but just to provide an opportunity and sense of ownership. This program has started and it is well received. I must mention during last year, because of COVID, it was very difficult situation. Must be knowing there are only two zoos in the country which are financially self-sustaining. Means they are running their business, managing their affairs without any government contribution. The only source of revenue is visitor fee, which is collected. Because of COVID last year, there was a shortfall of revenue. Thankfully, local politicians, local people came forward, and our district in charge minister helped us a lot. In a month, he could mobilize around 3.5 crore rupees of donations for a zoo. It is considerable amount. Looking to our expenditure, it is per month it is around minimum of 2 crore we need to look after animals and staff salary. So but it's been a great contribution. People even now also they're coming forward, though there is a difficult situation in their own firms and family, but still they are contributing as per their capacity. Next slide. So visitor number. This is about this contribution as such. So including financial as well as the sponsorship of work, we could mobilize around 7.5 crore of donations last year, and whereas our total revenue was only 14 crore because of this COVID. Next slide. Yeah. See, again, our revenue is because of number of visitors we receive. The entrance fees as such is very nominal. It is kept very low in order to provide an opportunity for all class of society to visit and visit the zoo and learn about animals and and contribute towards their conservation. So entrance fees is very nominal. Because of our visitor numbers, we get our revenue. Maybe it's 30 plus crore because we get around 3.4 million visitors every year on average. Next slide. So many people say no in Western mm, continents there is concept if any zoo wants to be a member of say any other zoo association, they ask what have you done for in situ conservation. So I can say I can proudly say that Mysuru Zoo is contributing continuously towards in situ conservation by providing a space and care for rescued animals. Because imagine if there is a tiger which is coming out and getting in conflict with human beings, if that one problematic animal is not taken out of the system, it will create lot of conflict. People may go out of control. They may set fire to forest or they may kill the animals. So in order to save the state from such situation, it is better to take out that animal. But if you take out, where are you going to house that animal? For example, as per our experience, to look after a tiger, we need to spend at least 7 to 8 lakh rupees per year per tiger. So see, it is an investment, right? It involves a lot of expenditure. So to look after this class of animals, we have come up with the rescue and rehabilitation center. In last 10 years, Mysuru Zoo has spent around 23 crore rupees on this facility as such. Including its establishment, its annual maintenance, staff salary, veterinary care, and all. Is all this amount has come from the visitor contribution. 99% of it is from visitor contribution. It is the amount collected from visitor as entrance fee. So this amount is diverted towards that facility so that animals are taken care of and there is a piece in the in situ conservation as such. Next slide. The Western countries we we hear the concept of sister zoo, right? Where well-to-do zoo would be helping other zoos in terms of technicality and other things. Herein also we are following it is this concept very meticulously. This is because of our current member secretary Sri Ravi BP sir. He is has done a lot for zoos development in our state. As I mentioned, there are only two zoos in our state. They are self-sustaining. One is Mysore, another is Bangalore. They are doing pretty well in terms of their revenue thanks to our visitors. So, whatever surplus revenue we have, we share it with our other upcoming zoos of Karnataka. There are 7 other upcoming zoos. These two zoos are helping them in terms of financially we are helping. We are providing them technical know-how, and we are also helping them in establishment of their veterinary hospitals, procurement of veterinary equipments, and also we are donating them our surplus animals so that zoos are improved in a shortest span possible and able to cater to visitors as early as possible. All zoos are developing at in a very good phase, and these sister zoo responsibility is being followed by both Mysore as well as Bangalore Zoo. Next slide. Yeah, again, waste management is a problem in any other establishment. So here also we come across such problem. We get waste in the form of plastic and again organic waste like dung of animals and food wastage, water wastage. So instead of throwing them out, we send plastic for recycling, and and animal dung we use for a bio gas generation, and also for vermicompost. Last year we could produce around 150 tons of vermicompost, and we use for domestic consumption, means our gardens and plantations. surplus we sell to local farmers and other plantation owners. So last year we could around no earn around 15 to 16 lakh rupees out of this vermicompost as such. Next slide. Yeah, again, see, this part of the country, we receive very less rainfall, say around 800 to 1000 annually, Mysore as such. So water is a problem, but if we take out Kaveri system out of this geographical system as such, but thanks to Kaveri there is water flow, but there is a problem of shortage of water if we don't take care of water. So in way back in 2010, 9, up, even up to 12, Mysuru Zoo used to buy water during summer because borewells used to dry up, and to meet out animals as well as visitor requirement, we used to buy water in summer. But one small intervention, you know, again by our ex director, present member secretary, Shri Ravi VP sir, that we harvest every year 79 crores of liter of rainwater, whereas our consumption is only 24 crore liters. So we are water sufficient when it comes to our rain harvesting. This small intervention not only helped us, but also people in and around Mysuru Zoo. There are more than uh, 5 to 6,000 families in the perimeter of say 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer. All are getting benefited by this small intervention. So what they did was, next slide. See, they were concrete. In olden days, there is a lake upstream. Because of rain, it used to overflow, and it used to flood the zoo as such. It used to damage some of the enclosures as well. To do away this one, they were constructing a concretized drains. But someone came forward and said, "Why don't you go for stone pitching?" So the then director again, Ravi P. sir agreed. It is a good thing that we should be better to go for stone pitching rather than this concrete as such. So they did the stone pitching, and it permitted percolation of rainwater as well as some hindrance to water flow as such, so that there is a slow movement of water as such, and sufficient percolation, and there is groundwater recharge. So this helped in sufficient groundwater recharge, and since last 6 to 7 years, we are not buying any water during summer because of this intervention. Next slide. Next slide. The stone pitched flood water drain. Again, moat are connected with this flood water drain. Again, moats are stone pitched so that water percolates down. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. They have created around 3 groundwater recharge ponds, so that water leaves only after these 3 tanks are filled. Next slide. Next slide. Again, in fact, water conservation of Mysuru Zoo is worth emulating, and one can try, practice in their respective institutes. When it comes to conservation education program, again, Mysuru Zoo being one of the pioneer zoos in, at least in country, who started conservation education as such. And it's been 3 decades that Mysore Zoo runs its conservation education program. Involvement of citizens is very. Citizens in Bangalore used to come forward and involve in that the stories count and all. Similar thing happens in Mysore Zoo as well. There is one education officer, but we have a band of volunteers. They are ready to assist us in all education related programs. So we should be thanking Mysoreans and all our volunteers for contributing continuously towards this successful conduct of all the conservation education programs. Next slide. Yeah, again, in Mysuru Zoo, focus has been given to naturalistic setup, so that animals, a natural habitat is recreated, and also a greenery of zoo is maintained. So that if I personally felt it, there is at least 3 to 4 degrees Celsius difference between city as well as the city when compared to zoo as such. Mysuru Zoo always has a uh, lower temperature during peak hours of summer compared to no center of the city. It's because of our green cover and this water harvesting intervention. Next slide. Next slide. There are a few zoos in the country where, who does their own production of some of the feed materials. We grow our own superworm, mealworm, rats and mice, rabbits, and poultry. We also have started this fodder plus plot last year. It has reduced our expenditure on fodder procurement a lot, so we are planning to continue this task as such in future also. It is really helpful. It helps in reducing your cost and also getting a quality fodder material to your zoo animals. Next slide. Yeah, I was mentioning conservation breeding program. So Mysuru Zoo has started conservation breeding center for gar, uh, grey wolf, wild dog, and LTM. In this LTM and Indian grey wolf facility as such, it is we got a financial assistance for this by Central Zoo Authority at the ratio of 60 is to 40. 60% is by CJ and 40% is from the zoo side. These facilities are ready, and wild dog, Indian grey wolf, and grey wolf, this Indian gaur as such, they have started functioning. We are waiting approval for LTM. Once we get, we'll be starting this LTM conservation breeding center also. Next slide. Slide, ma'am. Yeah, previous one. Yeah, in coming days we want to start conservation breeding center for Nilgiri langur, uh, gray jungle fowl, and giant squirrel. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. Next slide. So next. Yeah, my boss keep on saying that there are three components in zoo management. One is zoo animal, second is greenery, that is plant. Third is visitors. Visitors are very important. When they visit, we should be providing best of the best facilities, looking to the requirement, and including the the needs of specially abled people also. So over years, yes, we are trying to meet all the requirements, matching with the current trends and changes in society, and also it is its impact or ecological footprint as such is minimal. So we have a souvenir shops, toll-free toilets, and even we must all the visitor shelters, natural material, so that local farmers get revenue by selling their coconut sheets, and the art of building that that shelter as such remains in village area. Matlab, it survives because nowadays all are going for concretized structures. So these are traditional arts like making huts and with grass or coconut trees is a traditional art, but they are dying. So if we give them employment, so this art will survive and it will grow. So that also we are trying. All our visitor shelters are made of natural wood and coconut sheets, and it involves local artisans. This is one thing, and we also have local on restaurants and battery vehicle and the library is there, and baby care units are there, and again potable water free of cost they are there, and again like any other zoo, we to have a online ticket booking facility. Next slide. Yeah, I should mention about the two lakes. One is Karanji Lake and another is Lalitadripura Lake. These two lakes used to be a sort of septic tanks. All the sewage water used to enter these two lakes. Initially, I tell about this Karanji Lake. Again, it was a septic tank. Sewage water used to enter, but the leadership of then officers, then staff, they transformed this septic tank into a living habitat. They they ensured that all this septic water, sewage water enters the underground drainage system, and only rainwater enters this lake as such. There was some there used to be some flow of sewage water, but for that they did not go for a mechanical or chemical means of improvement. They adopted bioremediation technique, whereby there is no use of chemical, there is no use of mechanical force, but only by available natural energies or forces like sunlight, air, some plants which are known to absorb heavy metals, and some microbes which are known to hasten the rate of decomposition of organic matter in the water, sewage water. This technique was used to purify the water, and it becomes a very successful story in Karanji Lake. Looking at this success, Mysore City Corporation handed over another lake 2 years ago. It is around 16 acres lake in called Lalitadripur Lake. Again, it was a septic tank, but because of all these techniques like bioremediation techniques, this has improved a lot. And in last year, we could record around hundreds of species of birds from this lake alone. So these two lakes have become a living ecosystems in urban landscape of Mysore. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, this is about about story of Mysore in brief. Uh, yes, there are some issues which we are facing in Mysore City. But recent rule says that only 25% could be exotics, and as on today we have 150 species against 148 against 131. In last 9 years we could reduce around 22 species, but another 19 to 20 species are there. We need to reduce them. But I don't know how good it is, uh, because with species our specialization in housing those animals, taking care of these those animals will also go away. uh, uh, I personally feel, we should, as a country, we should relook this issue as such, because the wildlife or wild animals or biodiversity is a asset belongs to world as such. Our people too have a right to see the other animals. Otherwise, what happens is, uh, Mysuru will also be one of the zoos with common species like spotted deer, sambar, jackal. So what happens is it has a repercussions on self-sustenance of zoo as such. If your zoo is not different, so people, why should they come to your zoo, right? So that happens with the reduced number of species. It is very much likely that there will be reduction in number of visitors and thereby reduction in the revenue as such. So will ultimately affects the self-sustenance. This is one aspect. Second thing, see, if we contribute towards conservation of some of the exotic species like black rhino, it could be a white rhino, it could be any other primate species. If we could breed at our facility and help in release of those species in their natural habitat, it gives no improves image of not only of Mysuru Zoo but of country as such. So these prospects also we need to consider. This one thing. Second thing is the how to protect zoos financial conditions from pandemic like situation. So we have been self-sustaining zoo since 2002 as such, but we have to have the support of government in coming days. Otherwise it is difficult. So in that angle also we need to think whether it would be nice to have some corpus fund at the central level or the state level, just to meet out the you know requirement of the zoos in such situation. Otherwise, at least capital cost should be borne by the state, and remaining day-to-day operational cost, recurring cost could be managed by the zoo assets from its own revenue. Just I am proposing the way forward, but again it depends upon the decision of the government. This is where we are as of now, and thank you. If you have any questions, I will try to answer.
Right. Thank you, sir, for the very informative talk on the zoo and the achievements that you have, gone ahead with so far. We will now move on to the question answer section of our session today. So the first we will take questions for Dr. Gupta. So the first question for you, ma'am, is that the urban Loris program that is started in Bangalore, do you see it growing and expanding scope in any way? Do you see this program also collaborating with zoos for the spread of information about the species?
Both, I guess.
Ma'am, you
The
need to,
first
yeah.
part, I think I think I said yes or no both, because I think yes, we want to make it bigger and grow it large. That's the plan. But without funding, it's really difficult. And because it's urban, we still don't recognize urban habitats are important habitats. So a lot of the funding agencies um, do not want to give funds to urban habitats. And then what happens is that slender loris is not an endangered species according to IUCN. So there is less funding available from the organizations and the funding agencies abroad. So as a result of that, our project is suffering, and we're trying to figure out what are the best ways to get more money. Innovative ways, but we still haven't been able to do it. And so the second part of the question is answer is that yes, we do want to collaborate with zoos, and we do want to go ahead and do more citizen science in not only just in Bangalore but in other cities. And that's the main plan we have. Yes, we
All right.
would love to do it.
Okay. So the second question for you is that we may not have exact estimates of the population of the loris in wild, but in your opinion, which subspecies do you would be faring better, the Mysore slender loris or the Malabar slender loris? And which species do you think would need more citizen science effort?
It's a tricky question because I really don't know much about Malabar slender loris. When I first started working on slender loris, I was the first person to do it in the wild. So in some ways, well, not in some ways, I was the pioneer. But I never really did in rainforest as much as I have done it in dry forests. So in KMTR, we never seen Malabar slender loris, even up in the mountains. I don't really know much about Malabar slender loris. And I think slender loris as such requires more in attention, is because it's not the animals are going to get going are being poached all the time like tigers or elephants, but it's the habitat that's gone, are going to be less and less available to them. So I think that's one of the main things that we need to do. And it's probably both species, both subspecies needs to be studied. And first of all, we actually really need to do is figuring out what subspecies are there, that there is any genetic differences between those species, between the subspecies that we are calling. So that's the first step.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So those are the questions for you. Now we now move to the questions for the zoo section. So Mr. Ajit, are you there?
Yes, I am there. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the first question for you is that you have one of the highest visitation numbers in the country in terms of zoos. Do you think fewer people are likely to visit the zoo post the pandemic and post the opening of the lockdown? And how do you plan to to attract more visitors in the coming years?
Yes, we are witnessing, reduced number of visitors in our zoo, because the after first cycle as such, after first lockdown we opened. Average number of Mysuru Zoo visitor is 10,000 visitors per day. But now we are getting is say it started from 30, even 7 visitors a day. So we reached around 4,000 visitors during weekend, but again it is a lockdown. We are shut for visitors. So it takes time. In my personal opinions, no, despite of all your efforts and all precaution measures and practices you adopt at zoo, it is very unlikely that for next 1 or 2 years will not be reaching our normal flow as such. It takes time. What was second portion?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the second question was, how do you plan to reinvent to attract more visitors in the coming years?
The thing is, we should give a confidence in visitors through our practices that yes, zoo is much safer if you follow all the COVID appropriate behaviors. You can safely visit zoo and educate and yourself also. At the same time, enjoy the zoo atmosphere, zoo greenery as such. As I said, I'm not boasting about zoo, but walking through zoo itself is an experience. It's a luxury. So it is so green that you feel the purity of here in Mysuru Zoo as such. So that is people who are living in urban setup like Delhi, Bangalore, and other metros. If they come to our Karanji Lake or a zoo, if they walk, it's amazing experience. I'm not marketing zoo as such, but it is I'm experiencing my feeling, my experience
Yeah.
at Mysuru Zoo. It's amazing place to walk around. Yeah, we
Okay.
need to give a
All right.
confidence in visitors. Yeah.
Right. Okay, sir. So the next question for you is that with your experience, do you think wildlife safaris should be promoted as the next generation facilities in the zoos?
Yes, it should be promoted, ma'am. Why? There are two, three reasons. See, going to mm, protected areas is it is very costly affair. So I feel at least 90-95% of our Indian citizens cannot afford to visit
Mm-hmm.
or most of our protected areas. The fees or cost involved in travel as well as the entrance fees, it runs in thousands. I don't think most of our people are capable of doing that much. First thing. Second thing is at times time doesn't permit. Who people wouldn't be having time, though they are willing, but situation doesn't permit. Third is what will happen. For example, Mysore Zoo, we receive around 34 lakh visitors annually. Imagine 34 lakh visitors go to Bandipur and Nagarhole, so it will be disaster.
Right.
So, so that's the thing. And the fourth thing is, see, if I don't see how tiger looks like, how elephant looks like, so me appreciating that animal,
Mm-hmm.
me appreciating its conservation need as such, is it's going to be minimal. So if you
Yeah.
really want to motivate next generation for this conservation effort as such, if you want next generation to involve in conservation, zoo is the or this sort of safari parks are the way forward. I would like to share one example from Mysuru Zoo. What happens is, as I said, we are running this conservation education program for the last 3 decades, 30 years. So as on today, our products, matlab our ambassadors, people who are member of Mysuru Zoo Youth Club or summer camp as such, they are film stars, they are lawyers, they are into media, they are politicians, they are officers, they are in all sectors of society. So we, as I said, we keep on receiving lot many rescued animals to zoo. Usually, what happens is in most of the cities, the even other places, the demand of reporters as such is allow them very close to the animal as such, so that they can take a very good photograph of that animal, so that they can put that in the newspaper or their electronic media. But what happens is if you do that one, first of all, animal is under tremendous shock. Again, that if they go and click it because of flash and closeness of human being, they come under tremendous pressure. They injure themselves in that shock as such. So in Mysore, it's been 3 years for me in Mysore. I have not seen single reporter asking me for a no permission to go near animal and take photograph. What they say is, how is the animal, sir? How it is doing? Have you taken any? Could you get any photograph of that? If not now, If whenever you take, kindly share us with our mail or this WhatsApp passage. We will use this for media. So that is the level of awareness we could create now. So it is
All right.
because of this, these two conservation education programs of Mysuru. This is one single example. So we are getting maybe compared to any other zoo in country, the donation amount which we get is much higher. Much higher. Though there is difficult time, people still they are coming forward and contributing. It's only because of the awareness which Mysore Zoo has created over years. So that is why this involvement of people in conservation as such by different means is very much important.
All right. Thank you, sir. On that note, I think these are for you. And on that, we would now close the session. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank both speakers for taking time out from their busy schedules and educating the public more on the species and the zoo. And further, I would like to thank the audience who are, active participants throughout the session, and would like to inform them that Mysore Zoo will continue their conservation awareness activities under this campaign till the 23rd of May, and to do follow their Twitter page for updates on this. And we'll be hosting another Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo webinar, which will be the 11th webinar on next Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. on King Cobra and Pilikula Biological Park. So do tune in for that. And thank you, everyone, once again for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Thanks.